The calendar doesn't care about your dreams. Time moves forward whether you're ready or not, whether you're working on your goals or making excuses. But here's something most people never figure out until it's actually too late. The clock isn't your enemy. Your own hesitation is. Your fear of starting is. Your belief that somehow you've missed your chance is what kills more dreams than failure ever could. You know what I've noticed over all these years? People spend more energy convincing themselves why they can't start than it would take to actually begin. They do the math on their age, count up their failures, measure the distance between where they are and where they want to be, and they conclude it's not worth it. They've missed the boat. The ship has sailed. Everyone else got there first, and now the opportunity is gone. Let me tell you something that might change your perspective completely. The work doesn't discriminate. The work doesn't look at your birth certificate before deciding whether to reward you. The work doesn't care if you're starting at 25 or 55. The work only asks one question. Are you willing to show up and do what needs to be done? That's it. That's the only qualification that matters. I've watched people restart their entire lives in their 40s and build something extraordinary. I've seen folks who spent 2 decades going in the wrong direction turn it all around and create success that people half their age envy. And here's what every single one of them understood. Time was going to pass anyway. 5 years was going to go by whether they worked on their dreams or not. 10 years was going to happen whether they took action or stayed comfortable in their excuses. The real question isn't whether you're too late. The real question is, what are you going to do with the time you have left? Because you've got time, more time than you think. And if you're willing to work, that time becomes your greatest asset instead of your biggest regret. Think about this for a moment. Right now, someone somewhere is looking at their life and thinking the same thoughts you're thinking. They're wondering if it's too late to start that business, write that book, learn that skill, change that career, transform that body, repair that relationship, or pursue that dream that keeps them up at night. Most of them will decide it's too late and they'll spend the rest of their lives wondering what could have been. But a few of them, just a small handful, will decide to start anyway. And 5 years from now, those few people will be living completely different lives while everyone else is still making the same excuses. What separates these two groups isn't talent, it's not luck, it's not connections or resources or perfect circumstances. It's willingness. Simple willingness to do the work even when it feels like you're starting from behind, even when everyone your age has already figured it out, even when you've failed at this before, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Here's what I've learned. The work is the great equalizer. You can't buy your way past it. You can't charm your way around it. You can't wish it away or hope someone else does it for you. The only way through is through. And when you accept that, when you really accept that fundamental truth, age becomes irrelevant. Your past becomes irrelevant. Other people's timelines become irrelevant. All that matters is your willingness to put in the work starting right now. You want to know why most people never start? It's not because they don't have good ideas, or because they lack the ability. It's because they're doing the wrong calculation. They're measuring their current position against someone else's finish line and calling themselves failures before they even begin. They see someone who's been working for 10 years and think they can never catch up. They see someone younger who's already successful and think their moment has passed. But that's like refusing to plant a tree because you should have planted it 20 years ago. Yes, 20 years ago would have been better. You'd have a full-grown tree by now. But you didn't plant it 20 years ago. You can't go back and change that. So now you have exactly 2 choices. Plant it today and have a tree in 20 years, or don't plant it and have nothing in 20 years while wishing you'd started today. Those are your only options. Complaining about the time you've lost doesn't create a third option. The truth is, every single day you wait, you're making the problem worse. Every day you spend explaining why you can't start is a day you could have used to make progress. And the painful irony is that the people who say they don't have time are the same people who spend hours every day consuming content that doesn't improve their lives, scrolling through other people's accomplishments, and numbing themselves with entertainment that they won't remember next week. Let me be straight with you. Time isn't your problem. Willingness is your problem. You have the same 24 hours as everyone else. The question is whether you're willing to use some of those hours differently than you're using them now. Whether you're willing to sacrifice some comfort, some entertainment, some sleep, some approval from people who aren't going anywhere anyway in exchange for building something that matters to you. And here's the part that people don't want to hear. It's going to take longer than you think. It's going to be harder than you imagine. You're going to want to quit multiple times. You're going to wonder if you made the right choice. You're going to compare your beginning to someone else's middle and feel discouraged. All of that is going to happen. So you might as well get started now instead of 5 years from now, when you're going to face the exact same challenges but be 5 years older with 5 more years of regret. I've had people tell me they're too old to start a business at 45. Too old. At 45. That means they potentially have 20, 30, maybe even 40 years left, and they're going to spend all of it as an employee wishing they'd taken a chance. They're going to spend decades doing work they don't care about, making money for someone else's dream, counting down the days until retirement, all because they decided at 45 that they were too old? The mathematics of that decision don't work. Even if it takes you 5 years to build something meaningful, you still have decades to enjoy it. Even if you fail the first time and have to start again, you still come out ahead of never trying. Even if you only get to experience success for a few years before you're truly too old, those few years of living on your terms are worth more than decades of regret. But here's what really happens when you start doing the work. You realize age was never the issue. You realize you're actually more capable now than you were 10 years ago. You have better judgment. You have more patience. You understand people better. You've learned what matters and what doesn't. You've made enough mistakes to know which ones to avoid. You've accumulated enough wisdom to make better decisions faster. Young people have energy, but they waste most of it going in the wrong direction. They try everything without finishing anything. They chase shiny objects without building foundations. They have passion without discipline. And yes, some of them succeed despite all that. But most of them spend their 20s and 30s figuring out what you already know. So when you start later, you start smarter. You don't have to make all the beginner mistakes because life already taught you those lessons in other contexts. You don't have to learn patience the hard way because you've already developed it. You don't have to figure out that shortcuts don't work because you've already tried that and seen the results. What you're calling too late might actually be right on time. Right on time with the wisdom to do it properly. Right on time with the maturity to stick with it. Right on time with the perspective to appreciate it. Right on time with the understanding that this is your last best chance to build something meaningful, which means you're going to bring a level of commitment that younger people can't match. The work you're afraid to start becomes easier when you realize you're not competing with everyone else. You're not trying to be the youngest success story or the fastest learner or the most naturally talented. You're just trying to be better than you were yesterday. That's the only comparison that matters. That's the only race you need to win. Every single day that you do the work, you're beating the version of yourself who stayed comfortable. Every single day that you learn something new, you're ahead of the version of yourself who said it was too late. Every single day that you make progress, no matter how small, you're creating distance between who you were and who you're becoming. And here's the beautiful thing about doing the work. It compounds. The first day is the hardest because you're starting from zero. The first week is tough because you're still building the habit. The first month is challenging because you don't see much progress yet. But if you keep going, if you stay willing to do the work, something remarkable happens. The work gets easier as you get stronger. The progress becomes visible as the results compound. The habit becomes automatic as the repetition rewires your brain. 6 months in, you're not the same person who started. A year in, people who haven't seen you start asking what happened. 2 years in, you've forgotten what it felt like to be the person who was too afraid to begin. 5 years in, you're teaching other people how to do what you almost didn't start. But none of that happens if you're not willing to begin. None of that happens if you let your age or your past or your fear or your circumstances convince you that it's too late. All of that only happens when you decide that time is going to pass anyway, so you might as well use it to build something rather than explain why you didn't. You know what's really too late? Too late is when you're at the end of your life looking back at all the things you could have done, should have done, wanted to do, but didn't because you were too afraid or too proud or too convinced that you'd missed your chance. That's too late. That's when there's no more time to start, no more opportunities to try, no more chances to see what you were really capable of. But right now you're not too late. Right now you're exactly where you need to be to start building what you want to build. Right now the only question that matters is whether you're willing to do the work. And if the answer is yes, if you can look at yourself honestly and say, yes, I'm willing to work for this, then age becomes irrelevant, and time becomes your ally instead of your enemy. The calendar doesn't care about your dreams, it never has and it never will. But you care. Your dreams matter to you. Your goals keep you awake at night. Your potential is eating away at you because deep down you know you're capable of more than you're currently doing. And the only way to silence that voice, the only way to look at yourself in the mirror with genuine pride, the only way to get to the end of your life without regret, is to start doing the work. Now let me tell you about waiting. Most people are professional waiters. Not the kind that serves food, but the kind that waits for everything to be perfect before they act. They're waiting for more money. They're waiting for more time. They're waiting for the kids to grow up. They're waiting for the economy to improve. They're waiting for someone to give them permission. They're waiting for a sign from the universe. They're waiting for confidence they'll never feel. Until after they start. Here's the truth about waiting. It's just fear wearing a disguise. It's fear dressed up as prudence, as wisdom, as being responsible, but it's still just fear. And every day you wait, that fear gets stronger and your courage gets weaker. Every day you delay, you're training yourself to delay. You're reinforcing the habit of hesitation. You're becoming the kind of person who thinks about things instead of the kind of person who does things. The people who actually build something meaningful, who actually change their lives, who actually turn their dreams into reality, they're not the most talented people. They're not the smartest or the most connected or the luckiest. They're simply the ones who started before they felt ready. They're the ones who took action while everyone else was still planning. They're the ones who were willing to be uncomfortable, to look foolish, to fail in front of people because they understood something fundamental: you can't get good at something you never begin. Think about what you're really giving up when you decide you're too late. You're not just giving up the goal itself. You're giving up the person you would become in pursuit of that goal. You're giving up the skills you would develop. You're giving up the confidence you would build. You're giving up the relationships you would form. You're giving up the stories you would tell. You're giving up the pride you would feel. You're giving up all of that because you're focused on one thing: the fact that you're not starting from the ideal position. But nobody starts from the ideal position. Not really. Even the people you think had it easy. Even the ones who look like they were born for this, they all started somewhere imperfect. They all had doubts. They all had obstacles. They all had reasons to quit before they really got going. The difference is they didn't let those reasons become their story. They didn't spend years explaining why they couldn't. They just started working and figured it out as they went. You see, there are two ways to live your life. You can spend it explaining, or you can spend it doing. You can be the person at the party telling everyone about that book you're going to write someday, or you can be the person who quietly writes 2 pages every morning before work. You can be the person who knows all the reasons why your business idea won't work, or you can be the person who tests it and finds out for real. You can be the person who wishes they were in better shape, or you can be the person who shows up at the gym 3 times a week without fail. The explaining life is easier in the short term. You get to avoid the discomfort of trying. You get to protect your ego from the possibility of failure. You get to maintain your story about yourself without having to test whether it's true. But in the long term, the explaining life is agony. It's watching time slip away while you stay exactly where you are. It's seeing other people do what you wish you were doing. It's going to bed every night knowing you're not living up to your own potential. The doing life is harder in the short term. You have to face your inadequacy. You have to admit you don't know what you're doing. You have to risk looking stupid. You have to deal with failure and frustration and the gap between where you are and where you want to be. But in the long term, the doing life is freedom. It's progress you can see and measure. It's becoming someone you respect. It's going to bed tired but satisfied because you spent the day building instead of wishing. And here's what nobody tells you about starting late. You already paid the price for waiting. That price is paid. Those years are gone. You can't get them back no matter how much you beat yourself up about it. So the question isn't whether you should have started earlier. The question is whether you're going to add to the cost by waiting even longer. Every year you delay adds another year to the price. Every month you put it off adds another month. Every day you talk yourself out of starting adds another day. At some point, you have to stop the bleeding. At some point, you have to say enough. I've waited long enough. I've made enough excuses. I've spent enough time being less than I could be. Today is the day I start paying a different price. The price of effort instead of the price of regret. Because both paths have a price. Working has a price. Your time, your comfort, your certainty. Waiting has a price. Your dreams, your potential, your self-respect. You're going to pay either way. The only question is which price you'd rather pay. Which price leads somewhere you actually want to go. Let me tell you what happens when you commit to the work without worrying about whether it's too late. You stop spending mental energy on the wrong questions. You stop asking, what if I started years ago, and start asking, what can I do today? You stop comparing your status, beginning to someone else's middle, and start measuring your progress against your own starting point. You stop looking for reasons why it won't work, and start looking for ways to make it work. This shift in focus changes everything. When you're worried about being too late, you're stuck in the past. You're relitigating decisions you can't change. You're mourning opportunities that are gone. But when you commit to the work, you're focused on the future. You're thinking about what's possible. You're planning your next move. You're learning from what didn't work and trying something new. The work itself becomes the reward. Not just the results you're chasing, but the actual process of improving, of learning, of getting better at something that matters to you. Most people never experience this because they're so fixated on the destination that they can't appreciate the journey. They think success is something that happens at the end, so they spend the whole time miserable, waiting to arrive, treating the work as something to endure rather than something to embrace. But when you start with the understanding that you might be starting late, when you accept that it's going to take as long as it takes, something shifts. You stop being in such a hurry. You start paying attention to what you're learning. You start noticing your improvement. You start taking pride in showing up consistently, even when nobody's watching, even when the results aren't impressive yet, because you know that consistency is building something that can't be seen from the outside. And consistency is the secret that nobody wants to hear because it's not sexy. It's not dramatic. It doesn't make for good social media posts. But it's the real difference between people who transform their lives and people who just talk about it. Consistency is showing up on the days you don't feel like it. It's doing the work when you're tired, when you're discouraged, when you're not seeing the progress you hoped for. It's refusing to let a bad day become a bad week become a bad month become the end of your effort. You know what consistency really is? It's the accumulation of unremarkable days that add up to remarkable results. It's understanding that most days won't feel significant. Most days you won't make a breakthrough. Most days you'll do the work and go to bed not feeling much different than when you woke up. But if you keep stacking those unremarkable days on top of each other, if you keep showing up regardless of how you feel or what results you're seeing, eventually you'll turn around and realize you've traveled a distance that seemed impossible when you started. This is where starting late actually gives you an advantage. You've lived long enough to understand that life is mostly ordinary days. You're not expecting every day to be inspiring. You're not looking for constant motivation. You've learned that motivation comes and goes, but discipline stays if you build it. You've learned that feelings are temporary, but actions compound. You've learned that waiting to feel like doing something is just another way of not doing it. Young people often struggle with this. They expect every day to feel meaningful. They expect constant progress they can see. They expect the work to be as exciting as the dream. And when it's not, when it's just showing up and doing the basics over and over, they lose interest. They go looking for something that feels better, something that provides immediate gratification, something that makes them feel successful without the long, boring middle where you're working but not yet winning. But you know better. You've done enough difficult things to know that the boring middle is where everything is won or lost. That's where most people quit. That's where the crowd thins out. That's where you separate yourself from everyone who had the same idea but didn't have the staying power. The boring middle is your advantage if you're willing to outlast everyone who's looking for the shortcut. And there are no shortcuts, not real ones. There are ways to work smarter, ways to be more efficient, ways to avoid common mistakes. But there's no way to skip the work itself. There's no way to go from where you are to where you want to be without putting in the time, the effort, the repetitions, the failures, the adjustments, the learning. Everyone who has what you want went through this. Everyone who's good at what you want to be good at was once terrible at it. Everyone who's successful at what you want to succeed at had a beginning where they didn't know what they were doing. The difference is they didn't let that stop them. They didn't wait until they were good to start being consistent. They were consistent, and that made them good. They didn't wait until they felt confident to take action. They took action, and that built their confidence. They didn't wait until they had all the answers to begin. They began and found the answers along the way. This is what you need to understand. Everything you think you need before you start, you'll actually develop by starting. You think you need confidence? Start anyway, and watch your confidence grow with each small win. You think you need knowledge? Start anyway, and the knowledge you actually need will become obvious. You think you need resources? Start with what you have, and you'll be amazed at how resourceful you become when you're committed to making progress. Starting is the answer to almost every question you have about whether you can do this. Can you learn what you need to know? Start and find out. Can you find the time? Start and you'll discover you had more than you thought. Can you afford it? Start small and you'll find ways to fund it as you go. Can you handle the challenges? Start and you'll develop the capability to handle whatever comes. But none of this happens if you're sitting there calculating whether it's worth it to begin. None of this happens if you're still trying to figure out the perfect plan. None of this happens if you're waiting for circumstances to improve. All of this only happens when you accept that your circumstances are never going to be perfect, your plan is never going to account for everything, and your fear is never going to go away until after you prove to yourself that you can do this. So the question comes back to where we started. Are you willing to do the work? Not, are you excited about doing the work? Not, will doing the work be easy? Not, do you feel ready to do the work? Just, are you willing? Can you look at what needs to be done and say, yes, I'll do that, even if it takes years, even if it's hard, even if I fail a few times first, even if people think it's too late for me? Because if you can say yes to that, if you can commit to the work without needing guarantees about the outcome, without needing perfect conditions, without needing to feel a certain way about it, then it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how many times you've failed before. It doesn't matter who's ahead of you. It doesn't matter what year it is or how much time you've already lost. The work doesn't care about any of that. The work only cares that you showed up today and did what needed to be done. And if you show up tomorrow and do it again, and the day after that, and the day after that, you'll look up one day and realize you've built something. Not overnight, not easily, not perfectly, but you'll have built it. And that will matter more than anything else, because you'll know you did it when you could have quit. You started when you could have waited. You worked when you could have explained. And here's something else that happens when you finally commit and start doing the work. You stop caring so much about what other people think. When you're stuck in the planning phase, when you're still talking about what you're going to do someday, you're very concerned with how people perceive you. You're worried about their judgment. You're afraid they'll think you're foolish for trying. You're concerned they'll watch you fail. So you stay quiet, you stay safe, you stay small. But once you start actually working, once you're in the middle of the struggle, something changes. You realize that most people aren't paying that much attention to you anyway. They're too busy with their own lives, their own challenges, their own fears. And the ones who are watching, the ones who have opinions about what you're doing, they fall into two categories. There are the people who are inspired by your effort, who respect that you're trying, who want to see you succeed. And then there are the people who criticize, who doubt, who tell you all the reasons it won't work. The second group, the critics, they're revealing more about themselves than they are about you. Their negativity comes from their own fear, their own regret, their own disappointment with what they haven't done. When someone tells you it's too late for you to start, what they're really saying is, it feels too late for them. When someone says your goal is unrealistic, what they mean is it feels unrealistic for them to pursue their own goals. When someone laughs at your ambition, they're really expressing pain about their own abandoned dreams. Understanding this changes how you receive criticism. You stop taking it personally. You stop letting it derail you. You recognize it for what it is, a reflection of their limitations, not yours. And you keep working. You keep showing up. You keep making progress while they keep explaining why progress isn't possible. And the gap between you and them widens every single day. Not because you're special, but because you're willing to work while they're content to watch and judge. The people in the first group, the ones who are inspired and supportive, they become more important to you. Not because you need their validation, but because they remind you that what you're doing matters. They remind you that taking action in the face of fear is rare and valuable. They remind you that starting late is better than never starting. These people, they're on their own journey of growth, and they recognize a fellow traveler when they see one. They understand the courage it takes to begin when you feel behind. They respect the discipline it takes to continue when you're not seeing results yet. But even without these supportive people, Even if you're surrounded by doubters, you keep going. Because you're not doing this for them anymore. You're not doing it to prove anything to anyone else. You're doing it because you decided that living with the discomfort of working towards something is better than living with the pain of wondering what could have been. You're doing it because you understand that time is going to pass regardless, and you'd rather spend it building than regretting. You're doing it because you've finally accepted that it's never too late until you decide it is. The decision is yours. It always has been. Not your age, not your circumstances, not your past failures, not other people's opinions, just your decision, your willingness, your commitment to do the work starting now, today, this moment. Everything else is just noise. Everything else is just an excuse wrapped in what sounds like a reason, and you can keep listening to those excuses, or you can start doing the work. Those are your only two options. Choose wisely. Choose based on the life you want to live, not the life you've already lived. Choose based on who you want to become, not who you've been. Choose the work. Choose to start. Choose to prove to yourself that it's never too late when you're willing to do what it takes.